I was sitting in my living room in Grand Rapids, Michigan, when the doorbell rang 3 times in rapid succession, the kind of aggressive ringing that tells you someone's about to ruin your day. It was February 2nd, and the weather forecast had been warning about a polar vortex for the past week. Temperatures were expected to drop to -20 degrees, maybe colder with wind chill. I'd just gotten home from work at the auto parts warehouse where I managed inventory, and I was looking forward to a quiet evening. When I opened the door, there stood Patricia Morrison, the HOA president of our subdivision, Maple Creek Estates. She was in her mid-50s with that particular haircut that screamed, "I want to speak to your manager," and wore a puffy white jacket that made her look like an overstuffed marshmallow. Behind her stood 2 other HOA board members, Kenneth and Deanne, both looking uncomfortable in the biting cold. "Mr. Barrett Young?" Patricia asked, even though she knew exactly who I was. We'd lived in this neighborhood for 3 years. "That's me," I said, keeping the door mostly closed to preserve heat. "What can I do for you, Patricia?" "We're here on official HOA business," she said, pulling out a clipboard from under her jacket. "We've received complaints about unauthorized heating devices in your home." I blinked at her, genuinely confused. "Unauthorized heating devices? What are you talking about? Space heaters," she said, her voice dripping with accusation. "Multiple residents have reported seeing space heaters through your windows." According to Section 47B of the Maple Creek Estates bylaws, all heating equipment must be approved by the board before installation. "You're joking," I said. "Those are portable space heaters. I bought them at Target. They're not permanent installations." "The bylaws make no distinction," Patricia insisted. "Any heating device beyond the standard furnace must be approved. Fire hazards are a serious concern for property values and insurance rates." I felt my jaw tighten. It's about to be -20 degrees outside. "My furnace works fine, but I like having extra warmth in my home office and bedroom. Those heaters are modern, OL certified, and have automatic shutoffs." "I'm afraid that's not relevant," Patricia said. She pulled a document from her clipboard and thrust it toward me. "This is a notice of violation. You have 24 hours to remove all unauthorized heating devices from your property. If you fail to comply, we'll be forced to assess fines of $100 per day and potentially pursue legal action." "You can't be serious," I said, reading the document. It was printed on official HOA letterhead, complete with citations to various bylaws I'd never heard of. "We're quite serious," Patricia said. "Furthermore, we'll need to conduct an inspection to verify compliance." As per Section 12C, the HOA board has the right to inspect any property for safety violations with 24 hours notice. Consider this your notice. Kenneth shifted uncomfortably behind her. "Patricia, maybe we should give him more time, given the weather situation." "The bylaws are the bylaws, Kenneth," Patricia snapped. "We can't make exceptions just because it's cold. That's how property values decline." I looked at the 3 of them standing on my porch, their breath creating clouds in the frigid air. "Fine. Whatever. I'll deal with this after the freeze passes." "Tomorrow, Mr. Young," Patricia said firmly. "We'll return tomorrow at 2 p.m. to conduct our inspection. Good evening." They walked away, Patricia's heels clicking on my frozen walkway. I closed the door and looked at the notice in my hand, feeling anger rising in my chest. I'd bought 5 space heaters over the past month because my home office in the converted basement got particularly cold, and I liked keeping my bedroom warm at night. My elderly mother stayed with me sometimes, and she needed the extra warmth. The heaters were all modern ceramic models with safety features. The idea that they were somehow a violation was absurd. I called my neighbor, Mike Rodriguez, who'd lived in Maple Creek Estates for 7 years. He answered on the second ring. "Hey Barrett, what's up? Did you know the HOA has rules about space heaters?" I asked. Mike laughed. "Is Patricia bothering you? She went on a rampage about those last year too. Tried to fine the Hendersons for using a space heater in their garage. They fought it and won because the bylaw is so vaguely written it's basically unenforceable. She's threatening to fine me $100 a day," I said. "That's Patricia for you," Mike sighed. "She's been HOA president for 8 years. Every winter she finds something new to obsess over. Last year it was Christmas lights staying up past January 5th. The year before it was snow removal timing. She lives for this stuff. What should I do? Honestly, most people just ignore her until she moves on to the next target. She threatens legal action all the time, but the HOA's legal budget is tiny. They're not going to spend thousands in lawyer fees over space heaters." I thanked Mike and hung up, but something about Patricia's demeanor bothered me. She'd seemed particularly determined this time. I spent the evening researching the HOA bylaws online. Maple Creek Estates had a website with all the governing documents, and I found Section 47B buried in a document from 2018. It read, "All heating installations and modifications to existing heating systems must receive prior approval from the HOA board to ensure compliance with fire safety standards and insurance requirements." The language was ambiguous. Were portable space heaters installations? A reasonable person would say no, but I'd learned that HOA boards didn't always operate on reason. The next morning, I went to work as usual. The temperature had already dropped to 5 degrees, and the weather service was warning that the worst was coming that night. At lunch, I got a call from an unknown number. "Mr. Young, this is Detective Sarah Hernandez from the Grand Rapids Police Department. I'm calling about a wellness check at your property." My stomach dropped. "A wellness check? What's wrong?" "We received a call from your HOA expressing concern about potential fire hazards at your residence. They indicated you had multiple space heaters creating a dangerous situation. I'm calling to verify you're safe and to discuss the situation." I explained everything to Detective Hernandez, who listened patiently. When I finished, she sighed. "Mr. Young, I have to tell you, we get calls like this from HOAs more often than you'd think. If your space heaters are all certified and you're using them responsibly, there's no criminal issue here. This sounds like a civil dispute between you and your HOA. So you're not going to force me to remove them. We have no legal basis to do that," she said. "My advice is to document everything. Take photos of your heaters showing their safety certifications, and consider consulting with a lawyer if the HOA continues to pressure you." I thanked her and felt slightly relieved, but that relief was short-lived. At exactly 2 p.m., my doorbell rang again. I'd come home during my lunch break specifically for this inspection, not wanting to give Patricia any excuse to claim I'd refused access. This time, Patricia wasn't alone. She'd brought Kenneth and Deanne again, plus 2 men I didn't recognize. One wore a jacket with Morrison Property Management embroidered on it. The other had Fire Inspector printed on his coat. "Mr. Young," Patricia said formally, "we're here to conduct the inspection. This is my husband, Robert Morrison, and this is Fire Inspector Gerald Thompson." I stepped aside to let them in. The man claiming to be a fire inspector immediately made me suspicious. I'd dealt with actual fire inspectors at my workplace, and they didn't usually make house calls at the request of HOAs. "Mr. Thompson," I said carefully, "can I see your credentials?" He pulled out a wallet and flashed a badge so quickly I barely saw it. "I'm a certified fire safety inspector. I volunteer with the Kentwood Fire Department." "So you're not here in an official capacity?" I asked. "I'm here as a consultant for the HOA," he admitted. That confirmed my suspicions. Patricia had brought her husband and some friend who had fire safety training to intimidate me. It was a power play. They walked through my house, with Gerald taking photos of every space heater he found. I'd positioned them strategically. One in my basement office, one in my bedroom, one in the guest room where my mother stayed, one in the bathroom, and one in the garage workshop. All were placed away from curtains, furniture, and anything flammable. All were plugged directly into wall outlets, not extension cords. "These are clear fire hazards," Gerald announced after his inspection. "Multiple high-wattage devices creating excessive electrical load. The placement near carpeting is particularly concerning." "They're all rated for carpet use," I protested. "Look at the safety labels." "That's not the point," Patricia interjected. "They're unauthorized. According to our bylaws, they need to be removed immediately. Since you failed to comply with yesterday's notice, we're implementing the daily fine starting tomorrow. That's $100 per day, compounding." "This is ridiculous," I said, feeling my temper rising. "It's going to be -20 tonight." "You're seriously going to force me to remove my heating sources?" "The bylaws exist for everyone's protection," Patricia said coldly. "If you don't comply, we'll be forced to take more serious action." "What action?" I demanded. "You can't enter my home and take my property." Patricia glanced at her husband, then back at me. Section 89F of the bylaws states that in cases of immediate safety hazards, the HOA board has the authority to remediate dangerous conditions and bill the homeowner for the cost. I stared at her in disbelief. "You're threatening to break into my house and steal my heaters." "It's not theft when it's a legitimate safety remediation," Robert Morrison spoke up for the first time. His voice was smug. "We own a property management company. We've dealt with situations like this before." "Get out," I said firmly. "Your inspection is done. Get out of my house." Patricia's face hardened. "Mr. Young, I strongly advise you to reconsider your attitude. The HOA board has significant power to make life difficult for non-compliant residents. We can place liens on your property. We can take you to court. We can make every day a battle. Out, now." They left, but Patricia turned at the door. "You have until midnight tonight. After that, we'll take appropriate action." I slammed the door behind them and immediately called a lawyer. The firm I reached, Anderson and Associates, specialized in HOA disputes. I spoke with attorney James Anderson, who listened to my story with growing concern. "Mr. Young, what they are threatening is illegal," he said bluntly. "They can fine you according to their bylaws, yes, but they absolutely cannot enter your property and remove your belongings without a court order. That's theft, plain and simple. If they do that, you should call the police immediately." "Will the police actually do anything?" I asked. "If someone enters your home without permission and takes your property, that's breaking and entering and theft. Yes, the police will respond. Document everything. Take photos of your heaters in place with today's date visible. Save all communications from the HOA. If they do remove your heaters, file a police report immediately." I thanked him and spent the next hour photographing everything. I took pictures of each heater, their safety labels, their positioning, the receipts from when I'd purchased them. I photographed the timestamps on all of Patricia's emails and texts. I was building a case, just in case. That night, the temperature plummeted. By 10 p.m., it was -15 and still dropping. I had all my space heaters running and my house was comfortably warm. My furnace was working overtime, but the extra heaters took pressure off it and kept certain rooms more comfortable. At 11:30, my phone rang. It was my mother, calling from her apartment in Wyoming. "Barrett, honey, I'm worried about you with this cold snap. Are you staying warm?" "I'm fine, Mom. Got plenty of heat." I didn't mention the HOA drama. She worried enough already. "I'm glad I'm not visiting this week like I planned. This weather is frightening." We talked for a few more minutes before saying goodnight. I went to bed around midnight, the space heater in my bedroom creating a cozy warmth that helped me fall asleep despite my anger at the situation. I woke up at 6 a.m. to the sound of my phone ringing insistently. It was still dark outside. The caller ID showed Mike Rodriguez. "Barrett, did the HOA come to your house last night?" I sat up, instantly alert. "No. Why?" "Someone broke into the Hendersons' garage and took their space heaters. They're livid. Jeff Henderson is on the neighborhood Facebook group right now posting about it." I jumped out of bed and ran downstairs. My basement office heater was gone. So was the one in my bathroom. I ran to the garage. That one was missing too. I checked every room. Only the heaters in my bedroom and guest room remained, probably because they were in more private spaces. "They took mine too," I told Mike. "3 of them. Jeff is calling the police. You should too." I hung up and immediately dialed 911. The operator took my report and dispatched officers. While waiting, I checked my security camera system. I'd installed cameras the previous year after a string of package thefts in the neighborhood. The footage showed everything. At 2:15 a.m., a pickup truck had pulled into my driveway. 3 figures got out, their faces partially visible in the infrared footage. Patricia Morrison, her husband Robert, and Kenneth from the HOA board. They'd used a lockpick tool on my side door, the one leading from the garage. The camera clearly showed them entering my home, searching around, and leaving with my space heaters. They'd spent less than 10 minutes inside. 2 police officers arrived within 20 minutes. Officers Brandon Mills and Jennifer Torres took my statement and reviewed the security footage. Officer Mills's expression grew increasingly serious as he watched. "That's breaking and entering, theft, and potentially burglary," he said. "Do you know these individuals?" "That's Patricia Morrison, the HOA president, her husband Robert, and Kenneth Ward, a board member." Officer Torres wrote everything down. "We're going to need copies of this footage. Do you have a way to send it to us?" I provided them with USB drives containing the footage from all angles. They took photos of where the heaters had been positioned and documented everything. While they were still there, my doorbell rang. It was Jeff Henderson, my neighbor from 3 houses down. "Barrett, the police here too." "Those HOA psychos broke into your place." "Looks like it," I said. Jeff was a construction foreman, a big guy with a usually jovial personality. Right now he looked furious. "They got us too. Broke in through our back door, took both our heaters. We've got a newborn, Barrett." "My wife is furious and scared. Who breaks into people's homes?" Officer Mills overheard this. "Mr. Henderson, I'm Officer Mills. We're investigating a similar incident at this property. Would you mind if we came by to take your statement and review any security footage you might have?" "Absolutely," Jeff said. "We've got cameras too." Over the next 2 hours, the police discovered that Patricia and her accomplices had hit 6 homes in Maple Creek Estates, all homeowners who'd been cited for space heater violations. They'd stolen a total of 18 space heaters worth roughly $3,000. All 6 homeowners had security footage. By 9 a.m., the story had spread through the neighborhood. The Facebook group was exploding with posts. Some residents were outraged at the break-ins. Others were defending Patricia, claiming she was protecting property values and safety. The division was stark and bitter. At 10 a.m., I received a call from Detective Hernandez, the officer who'd called me about the wellness check. "Mr. Young, I'm now the lead detective on this case. We've obtained warrants for Patricia Morrison, Robert Morrison, and Kenneth Ward. We're bringing them in for questioning. I wanted to give you a heads up that this is being taken very seriously. Good, I said. Will I get my heaters back? We'll need them as evidence for now, but eventually, yes. In the meantime, stay warm and safe. With this cold, you might want to purchase replacements. I thanked her and immediately drove to the hardware store. The temperature was -18, with wind chills making it feel like -30. The store was packed with people buying emergency supplies. The space heater section was completely sold out. So was the next store I tried, and the one after that. The polar vortex had everyone scrambling for heat sources. I finally found 2 small heaters at a Menards in Kentwood, paying premium prices for basic models. On my way home, my phone rang. Unknown number, Mr. Young. This is Patricia Morrison. Her voice was strained, panicky. We need to talk. Through lawyers, I said, and started to hang up. Wait, please. The desperation in her voice stopped me. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. We didn't break into your home. We exercised our legitimate authority under the bylaws to remediate a safety hazard. You broke in at 2 in the morning and stole my property, I said coldly. The police have it on video. It wasn't theft, it was emergency remediation, she insisted. But that's not why I'm calling. We need your help. The furnace at the community center has failed. The pipes are going to freeze and burst. We have a serious emergency. Call a plumber, I said. We've tried. Everyone is overwhelmed with emergency calls. We can't get anyone out here until tomorrow at the earliest. The temperature in the building is already down to 40 degrees. We need to bring in space heaters to keep the pipes from freezing until we can get the furnace repaired. I almost laughed at the irony. So you broke into people's homes to steal their space heaters because they were fire hazards, and now you want space heaters for your own emergency. This is different, Patricia said weakly. This is the community center. It belongs to all of us. If the pipes burst, the damage will be catastrophic. We're talking hundreds of thousands in damage. The HOA will have to assess every homeowner to cover it. Not my problem, I said. You created this situation. You deal with it. Barrett, please. She'd never used my first name before. I made a mistake. I can admit that. I was trying to enforce the rules, but I went too far. I'm sorry. Can we please work something out? Do you have any space heaters we could borrow? We'll pay you. We'll drop all the fines. We'll amend the bylaws. I have 2 heaters, I said. They're keeping my house from becoming an icebox after you stole my others. No, you can't borrow them. What about your stolen heaters? Where are they? Police evidence. Thanks to you. Patricia made a sound that might have been a sob. You have to understand, the community center is vital. We have the pipes to worry about, but we also have equipment, records, expensive furniture. If it all freezes, we're ruined. Goodbye, Patricia. Wait, what if I give you your heaters back? The ones we removed from your property. If I can get them back to you, could we borrow some? Just to prevent disaster, I thought about it. Patricia, the police have arrest warrants for you. Even if I wanted to help, which I don't, you're about to be arrested for burglary and theft. I don't think you're in a position to be making deals. She was silent for a long moment. They're really going to arrest me. You committed multiple felonies. What did you think would happen? I was following the bylaws, she said, her voice breaking. I was trying to protect the neighborhood, property values, safety standards. That's my job as HOA president. I've given 8 years of my life to this community. You broke into people's homes and stole their belongings, I said. You don't get to hide behind bylaws for that. She hung up without another word. I drove home feeling strange. Part of me was satisfied that Patricia was finally facing consequences. Another part felt odd about the community center situation. If the pipes really did burst, every homeowner would be assessed for the repairs. That would affect me too. When I got home, there was a news van parked on my street. A reporter was interviewing Jeff Henderson in his driveway. I tried to slip past, but the reporter spotted me. "Sir, are you one of the residents affected by the HOA break-ins?" I paused. Part of me wanted to ignore them, but another part realized this story needed to get out. Maybe public attention would prevent future HOA overreach. "I am," I said. "I'm Barrett Young. The HOA president broke into my home early this morning and stole my space heaters." The reporter, a woman in her 30s, looked excited. "Can you tell us what happened?" I gave her the abbreviated version, emphasizing the absurdity of being cited for fire hazards for using certified safe heaters, then having them stolen during a dangerous cold snap. She recorded everything, and I could see this was exactly the kind of local interest story that would get attention. "We've reached out to Patricia Morrison for comment," the reporter said. "She declined to speak with us. The Grand Rapids Police Department has confirmed they've issued arrest warrants for 3 individuals related to multiple breaking and entering incidents in this subdivision." After the interview, I went inside and tried to warm up my house with my 2 small replacement heaters. It wasn't enough. My basement office was freezing. The bathroom was cold. Even with my furnace running constantly, the house felt uncomfortable. I was burning through heating oil at an alarming rate, and my heating bill was going to be astronomical. Around 2 p.m., I saw police cars pull up to Patricia's house, which was visible from my front window. She lived just 4 houses down, in one of the larger homes with the circular driveway. Officers approached her door. Even from a distance, I could see the confrontation. Patricia's husband Robert came out first, then Patricia. They were both placed in handcuffs and led to separate patrol cars. An hour later, police arrested Kenneth Ward as well. The neighborhood was in chaos. Some residents were celebrating, others were horrified, and many were worried about what this meant for the HOA's future leadership. My phone rang constantly. News outlets wanted interviews. Neighbors wanted to gossip. My mother called in a panic after seeing the story on the news. I had to reassure her I was fine and the criminals were arrested. That evening, the temperature hit -22 degrees. Despite my furnace running nonstop and both space heaters working, parts of my house were uncomfortably cold. I piled on layers and tried to work on my laptop, but my fingers kept getting numb. Around 8 p.m., Mike Rodriguez called me. "Barrett, we need to talk about the community center." "What about it?" "The temperature in there is down to 25 degrees. The pipes are definitely going to freeze tonight. The HOA's insurance deductible is $50,000, and the board is estimating total damage could exceed $200,000 if we lose everything in there. That's going to be a massive assessment on all of us. So what do you want from me?" I asked. "Some of us are organizing an emergency meeting. The remaining board members plus interested homeowners. We need to figure out what to do. Can you come?" "Where?" "The community center's frozen, my house. 7 of us are meeting here in an hour. Please, Barrett." "I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but we need level heads right now." I almost said no. I was tired, cold, and angry, but Mike was right. If the community center was destroyed, we'd all pay the price. I agreed to come. Mike's house was packed when I arrived. Besides Mike, there was Jeff Henderson, Deanne from the HOA board, 3 other homeowners I knew by sight but not by name, and surprisingly, Robert Morrison's business partner, a man named Carl Stevens. Deanne looked miserable. Her eyes were red from crying. "I want to start by apologizing," she said. I knew Patricia was upset about the space heaters, but I had no idea she was planning to break into homes. Kenneth and I just went along with the inspections. We never agreed to any of the rest of it. I'm horrified by what happened." "Are you facing charges?" Jeff asked. "No." The police cleared me. They determined from the video footage and phone records that I wasn't involved in the actual break-ins. Kenneth was, but I wasn't. "I've resigned from the board effective immediately. I can't be associated with this." Carl Stevens spoke up. "I'm here representing Morrison Property Management. Robert called me from jail. He's asked me to help coordinate an emergency response for the community center. I want to be clear. I don't condone what they did. What Robert and Patricia did was criminal, and they'll face the consequences. But right now, we have a crisis that affects everyone." "What's the current situation?" I asked. Carl pulled out his phone and showed us photos. "I went to the community center an hour ago. The temperature inside is 23 degrees and dropping. The furnace is completely dead. I'm not a heating specialist, but it looks like a major component failure. In this cold, we're looking at frozen pipes within the next few hours. Once those pipes burst, we'll have flooding, structural damage, destroyed equipment." The community center houses all the HOA records, maintenance equipment worth tens of thousands, furniture, a full kitchen. The damage will be catastrophic. "Have you contacted emergency heating companies?" Mike asked. "Everyone is overwhelmed," Carl said. "The entire region is in crisis mode. There are house fires from overloaded electrical systems, frozen pipes everywhere, furnace failures across the city. Every HVAC company, plumber, and emergency service is backlogged for days. I can't get anyone to even look at the furnace until Friday." "What about temporary heaters?" someone asked. "That's the problem," Carl said, looking directly at me. "Every store is sold out. Industrial heaters are all rented. The only option would be to borrow residential space heaters from homeowners to at least keep the temperature above freezing until we can get proper repairs." I felt everyone's eyes turn to me. "No," I said immediately. "Barrett, please hear me out," Carl said. "No, Patricia Morrison broke into my home and stole my property because she deemed space heaters a fire hazard. Now you want me to provide space heaters for the HOA facility. The hypocrisy is stunning." "I know," Carl said. "I completely understand your anger, but the reality is if the community center is destroyed, every homeowner in Maple Creek Estates will be assessed thousands of dollars to rebuild and replace everything. That includes you." "Then Patricia should have thought about that before she decided to play vigilante." Jeff Henderson spoke up. "Barrett, I'm as angry as you are. They stole from me too. My wife wants to sue them into oblivion, but Carl's right. If we let the community center be destroyed out of spite, we're only hurting ourselves." "This isn't spite," I said. "This is consequences. Actions have consequences. Patricia needs to learn that." Mike put a hand on my shoulder. "Barrett, I get it, but Patricia is already in jail. She's going to face criminal charges. Her life is ruined. We don't need to compound the disaster by letting $250,000 in damage happen when we could prevent it." I looked around the room. Everyone was watching me, waiting. I felt trapped. They were right about the financial impact, but everything in me rebelled against helping the HOA after what they'd done. "What exactly are you asking?" I said carefully. Carl pulled out a notepad. "We need to get the temperature in the community center above 32 degrees. Just enough to prevent the pipes from freezing. Based on the square footage and insulation, we'd need approximately 12 to 15 space heaters running continuously until we can get the furnace repaired. We're asking residents to loan their space heaters for 2 to 3 days maximum." "Who's going to monitor them?" I asked. "Weren't these supposedly massive fire hazards 24 hours ago?" "I'll personally stay at the community center and monitor everything," Carl said. "Around the clock if necessary. We'll have volunteers rotating in shifts. I'm also bringing in a generator to ensure we don't overload the electrical system." "And what about liability?" I asked. "If something does catch fire, who's responsible?" "The HOA's insurance will cover any incidents," Deanne said. "I've already contacted our insurer to confirm. Any damage or loss will be covered under the HOA policy, not individual homeowner policies." I sat back and thought about it. The logical part of my brain knew they were right. The emotional part wanted to watch Patricia's world burn, metaphorically speaking. But I wasn't a vindictive person by nature. I was just angry. "I have 2 heaters," I said finally. "Small ones I just bought today because mine were stolen. I need at least one to keep my own house comfortable." "You can borrow one, but I want it back in perfect condition, and I want written documentation that the HOA is responsible for any damage or loss." "Done," Carl said immediately. "Anyone else?" Around the room, other homeowners started agreeing. Mike had 3 heaters he could loan. Jeff was willing to provide 2 despite his anger. By the end of the meeting, we'd identified 11 space heaters that people were willing to contribute. Carl said he could provide 4 more from his own property management facilities. We drove to the community center in a convoy. The building was dark and felt like a tomb. Our breath was visible inside. Carl had brought a generator and industrial-grade extension cords. We spent an hour setting up the space heaters strategically throughout the building, focusing on areas with exposed pipes. By midnight, the temperature inside had stabilized at 35 degrees, not comfortable but enough to prevent immediate disaster. Carl settled in with a sleeping bag, a thermos of coffee, and his phone. He was actually planning to sleep there and monitor things. "Thank you," he said to all of us as we prepared to leave. "I know this situation is insane. Robert is my business partner and friend, but what he did was wrong. He knows it. Patricia knows it. They're going to face justice for it." I drove home exhausted and conflicted. I'd helped the HOA that had violated my home and stolen my property. Was that weak? Or was it just practical? The next morning, the news story had exploded. Multiple news outlets were covering the HOA breaking and entering scandal. Patricia Morrison's face was all over the local news. The story had everything: a polar vortex, home invasions, and abuse of power irony. It was going viral on social media. I got calls from 2 more news outlets requesting interviews. A producer from a national morning show wanted to feature the story. The reporter from the previous day had written an article that was trending online. The article's headline read, "Michigan HOA president arrested after breaking into homes to seize space heaters during dangerous cold snap." The story detailed everything, including my interview, Jeff's interview, and comments from the police about the arrest. At work, my coworkers were buzzing about it. Everyone had seen the news. My boss pulled me aside. "Barrett, are you okay? I saw you on the news. What a nightmare." "I'm fine," I said. "Just dealing with crazy HOA stuff." "Take whatever time you need," he said. "If you need to deal with legal stuff or anything, we'll work around it." That afternoon, Detective Hernandez called me. "Mr. Young, I wanted to update you on the case. All 3 defendants have been formally charged. Patricia Morrison and Robert Morrison are each facing 6 counts of breaking and entering, 6 counts of larceny, and 1 count of conspiracy. Kenneth Ward is facing the same charges. Their arraignment is scheduled for tomorrow." "What's the likely outcome?" I asked. "Given the clear video evidence and the number of victims, I'd say they're looking at serious consequences. Breaking and entering is a felony with up to 10 years. Larceny of property worth what they took is also a felony. With multiple counts, they could face significant prison time, though first-time offenders often get reduced sentences. They'll probably try to plea bargain. What about restitution? That'll be part of the civil process. You can sue them for the value of your stolen property, any damages, legal fees. Given the circumstances, I'd say you have a strong case. I thanked her and hung up. The idea of Patricia and Robert Morrison going to prison seemed surreal. 24 hours ago, they'd been standing in my living room acting like authority figures. Now they were criminals facing felony charges. That evening, I attended the arraignment via Zoom. The court had set up remote access for victims. Patricia appeared on screen looking haggard. Her expensive haircut seemed deflated. She wore an orange jumpsuit. Robert looked angry, his jaw clenched. The judge read the charges. The prosecutor outlined the case, emphasizing the premeditated nature of the crimes, the number of victims, and the defendants' abuse of their positions of authority. The defense attorney, a harried-looking public defender, argued for bail, citing their ties to the community and lack of prior criminal history. The judge set bail at $50,000 each. These are serious charges involving multiple victims and a clear abuse of trust, the judge said. While I'm willing to allow bail, I want to make clear that these charges will be prosecuted vigorously. Patricia and Robert were both able to post bail that evening. Kenneth Ward's family posted his bail as well. All three were released with conditions: no contact with victims, no leaving the state, and immediate suspension from any HOA activities. The news coverage continued for days. The story resonated with people who'd had their own HOA horror stories. Comment sections filled with thousands of stories about HOA overreach. Some people defended Patricia, arguing she was just trying to enforce safety rules, but they were vastly outnumbered by people outraged at the home invasions. On Friday, the HVAC company finally arrived at the community center. The furnace needed a complete compressor replacement, plus repairs to the heat exchanger. The total cost was $18,000, but because we'd prevented the pipes from freezing, that was the only damage. Carl estimated we'd avoided at least $200,000 in additional damage. I retrieved my borrowed space heater, which was returned in perfect condition. Carl thanked me again and handed me a check for $100. "What's this?" I asked. "Rental fee," he said. "It's the least the HOA can do." I almost refused it, but then decided to take it. Why not? They owed me far more than that. Over the following weeks, the legal process ground forward. The prosecutor offered a plea deal: reduced charges in exchange for guilty pleas, restitution to all victims, and resignation from the HOA board. Patricia and Robert's lawyer negotiated for 3 days before they accepted. In March, they appeared before a judge for sentencing. I attended in person this time, along with Jeff Henderson and 3 other victims. The courtroom was packed with neighbors, news media, and curious onlookers. Patricia's lawyer presented her as a dedicated community volunteer who'd made a terrible error in judgment. Character witnesses testified about her years of service, her volunteer work, her previously clean record. She cried on the stand, apologizing to each victim by name. "I truly believed I was protecting the community," she said through tears. "I let my concern for safety override my judgment and common sense. I violated people's homes and their trust. I can never undo that. I can only say I'm profoundly sorry and ask for the opportunity to make amends." Robert Morrison was less apologetic. His testimony was defensive, arguing they'd been trying to prevent fire hazards and protect property values. The judge visibly bristled at his attitude. Kenneth Ward was somewhere in between, clearly remorseful but also bitter about how things had unfolded. When it was time for victim impact statements, Jeff Henderson went first. He described his wife's terror at discovering someone had broken into their home while their newborn slept upstairs. He talked about the violation of trust, the fear, the anger. I went next. I kept my statement factual and calm, describing the financial impact, the discomfort during the dangerous cold, and the broader concern about HOA overreach. This case represents everything wrong with unchecked HOA authority, I said. When board members believe they have the right to enter homes and seize property without due process, we've lost sight of basic rights. I hope this case serves as a warning to other HOAs that governing documents don't override constitutional rights and basic decency. The judge listened to all the victim statements, then delivered her ruling. This court has rarely seen such a clear-cut case of authority misused, she began. The defendants held positions of trust in their community. Rather than serving their neighbors, they terrorized them. They broke into multiple homes. They stole property. They did so with planning and coordination, which demonstrates this wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment but a calculated decision. She sentenced Patricia Morrison to 18 months in prison, with the possibility of parole after 9 months, followed by 3 years of probation. She also ordered Patricia to pay full restitution to all victims, totaling nearly $4,000, plus court costs and fees. Robert Morrison received the same sentence. The judge noted his lack of remorse as an aggravating factor. Kenneth Ward, who'd shown more remorse and had a smaller role, received 12 months with the possibility of parole after 6 months, plus probation. All 3 were immediately remanded into custody. Patricia began crying as the bailiffs led her away. Robert looked stunned, as if he truly believed his money and position would protect him from consequences. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Jeff Henderson gave a statement about justice being served. I declined to comment beyond saying I was satisfied with the outcome. The story ran on local news that evening and made national news the next day. It became a cautionary tale about HOA overreach, cited in articles about property rights and homeowner associations' limitations. Back at Maple Creek Estates, the HOA held emergency elections. Diane had already resigned. The interim board members organized a complete review of all bylaws. The space heater restriction was immediately removed. Several other problematic bylaws were also revised or eliminated. Mike Rodriguez was elected as the new HOA president. His platform was simple: minimal interference, reasonable rules, respect for homeowners' rights. He won in a landslide. The new board also voted to implement strict oversight measures. No board member could enter any property without the homeowner present, unless there was a genuine emergency requiring immediate response. All enforcement actions had to be reviewed by an independent lawyer before implementation. And most importantly, the board had to maintain transparency with all homeowners about decisions and finances. In April, I received a check in the mail. It was from Patricia Morrison's restitution payment. The full value of my stolen space heaters, plus the cost of my replacement heaters, plus compensation for my time and distress. The total was just over $800. Included with the check was a handwritten note on plain paper. "Mr. Young, I know this doesn't undo the harm I caused. I was wrong. I let my desire for control and order override my basic humanity and respect for others. I hope someday you can forgive me, but I understand if you can't. I'm truly sorry, Patricia Morrison." I stared at the note for a long time. Part of me wanted to rip it up to hold onto my anger. But another part recognized that Patricia had lost everything: her freedom, her reputation, her position in the community. She'd paid a heavy price for her actions, I deposited the check and filed the note away. Forgiveness might come eventually, but I wasn't there yet. Summer brought changes to Maple Creek Estates. Several families moved out, unable to handle the scandals associated with the neighborhood. New families moved in, attracted by the lower property values that resulted from the negative publicity. The community center was repainted and renovated, with a plaque installed that read, Maple Creek Community Center, dedicated to serving our community with respect, transparency, and accountability. Mike Rodriguez proved to be an excellent HOA president. He held monthly meetings where homeowners could voice concerns. He kept fees reasonable. He focused on maintaining common areas and ensuring basic services without the petty enforcement that had characterized Patricia's regime. In August, I saw Robert Morrison at a grocery store. He was alone, looked thinner, and moved like a man who'd aged 10 years. He saw me and quickly turned away, disappearing down another aisle. I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and pity. Patricia was released on parole in November, having served 9 months. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she'd moved to Indiana to live with her sister. She and Robert had divorced while she was in prison. Their house in Maple Creek Estates sold at a significant loss. Kenneth Ward was released around the same time and also moved away, relocating to Ohio where he had family. The following winter, when temperatures dropped and the Weather Service warned of another polar vortex, I bought several high-quality space heaters. I placed them throughout my house without any fear of citations or violations. My mother visited for a week, and I kept the guest room comfortably warm. On the coldest night, when the temperature hit -15, I stood in my warm living room with a cup of hot coffee and thought about everything that had happened. The violation of my home, the legal battle, the media attention, the arrests and sentencing, the community changes. It had been a nightmare, but it had also resulted in positive change. The HOA was better now. Homeowners had more power and protection. The bylaws were more reasonable, and 3 people who'd abused their authority had faced real consequences. My phone buzzed with a text from Mike Rodriguez. HOA meeting next week. Agenda: holiday decoration guidelines. Don't worry, very reasonable. Just asking people to take them down by mid-January instead of leaving them up year-round. Thoughts? I smiled and texted back. Sounds fine. As long as you're not planning any midnight raids if someone leaves lights up until February. He sent back a laughing emoji, and never. Those days are over. I looked out my window at the snowy street, at the neighbors' houses with their warm lights glowing in windows. Maple Creek Estates felt like a real community now, not a place ruled by petty tyrants with clipboards. My space heaters hummed quietly, keeping my home warm and comfortable. They were legal, safe, and mine. No one was going to take them away. The story became a case study in several law school courses about HOA limitations and property rights. A professor from Michigan State University even contacted me to interview me for a paper on homeowner association governance and the need for oversight. The local news did a follow-up story on the 1-year anniversary of the arrests. They interviewed several residents, including me. I talked about how the community had healed and improved. Jeff Henderson discussed how the experience had brought neighbors together in unexpected ways. Mike Rodriguez explained the new governance structure that prevented future abuses. The reporter asked if I'd ever consider serving on the HOA board myself. I laughed. No, I said firmly. I've seen what that kind of power can do to people. I'm happy being a regular homeowner who pays his dues, follows reasonable rules, and lives his life. That's enough for me. But I did volunteer for the Neighborhood Watch program and helped organize community events. I wanted to contribute positively without getting caught up in the politics and power dynamics that had corrupted Patricia Morrison. In the spring, the civil lawsuits were settled. All 6 homeowners who'd been victimized received additional compensation beyond the criminal restitution. My share was another $1,200, covering my legal fees and additional damages. The money came from the Morrisons' homeowners' insurance, which covered some of their liability despite the criminal nature of their actions. Life gradually returned to normal. I focused on my work at the warehouse. I dated someone I met through a friend, though it didn't work out long term. My mother visited regularly, always commenting on how warm and cozy my house was. The space heaters that had started everything sat in my closet during the warmer months, a reminder of a bizarre chapter in my life. When I looked at them, I didn't feel anger anymore. Instead, I felt something like satisfaction. I'd stood up to abuse of authority. I'd refused to be intimidated. I'd helped my community improve itself. The HOA never bothered me again. No citations for minor violations. No threats. No power trips. When I needed to replace my fence, I submitted the required application to the Architectural Review Committee. It was approved within a week with a simple email. Approved. Looks good. Thanks for submitting. That was how it should work. Simple, respectful, reasonable. Years later, I would tell this story at parties or gatherings when the conversation turned to HOA horror stories. People always reacted the same way: disbelief, outrage, then satisfaction when they heard about the arrests and consequences. That actually happened, they'd ask. Every word, I'd confirm. Good, they'd usually say. People like that need to face consequences, and they were right. Patricia Morrison had been a cautionary tale, an example of what happens when small authority goes to someone's head. She'd let her desire for control override her basic respect for others' rights and dignity. She'd paid dearly for it. But more importantly, the community had learned and grown from the experience. Maple Creek Estates was better for having gone through the fire, metaphorically speaking. We had better leadership, better rules, better relationships among neighbors. Sometimes, I thought about Patricia and wondered how her life had turned out. Was she working somewhere? Had she rebuilt her life in Indiana? Did she think about that winter and the decisions she'd made? I hoped she'd found some peace and learned from her mistakes. As for me, I continued living in Maple Creek Estates for several more years. I eventually sold the house and moved to a condo downtown Grand Rapids, tired of yard maintenance and wanting a change of pace. But I never forgot the lesson of that winter, the importance of standing up to injustice, even when it's uncomfortable. The necessity of holding people accountable for their actions, regardless of their position. And the value of a community that respects individual rights while maintaining reasonable standards. The space heaters came with me to the condo. I used them occasionally when the heating system struggled to keep up on the coldest nights. Each time I plugged one in and felt the warm air begin to flow, I thought about everything they'd represented. A violation, a fight, a victory, and ultimately a positive change in the end. That's what mattered. Not the anger or the fear or the frustration, but the change that came from standing firm and refusing to accept abuse of power. Patricia Morrison's attempt to control her neighbors through intimidation and illegal actions had backfired spectacularly, leading to her own downfall and the improvement of the entire community. Justice had been served, both in the criminal courts and in the court of public opinion. The story had resonated with thousands of people who'd felt powerless against their own HOAs. It had sparked conversations about the need for HOA reform and better oversight. It had shown that even when faced with authority figures who abuse their power, regular people can fight back and win. That winter's polar vortex had been brutal, with temperatures that threatened life and property. But it had also exposed the rot at the heart of Maple Creek Estate's governance and given the community a chance to rebuild something better. Years after everything happened, I ran into Diane at a coffee shop in Grand Rapids. She'd been the board member who'd resigned in horror after the arrests. We recognized each other immediately. "Barrett," she said, approaching my table hesitantly. "I don't know if you remember me." "I remember," I said. "Diane, right?" she nodded. "I just wanted to say again how sorry I am about everything that happened. I should have stood up to Patricia earlier. I knew she was becoming obsessive about enforcement, but I never imagined she'd do something so extreme." "It's okay," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "You weren't involved in the actual break-ins. You resigned when you learned the truth. That took courage." "I still feel guilty," she admitted. "I enabled her by going along with those inspections, by not questioning her authority. I've thought about it a lot over the years. We all learn," I said. "The important thing is that the community is better now. Mike did a great job as president." "He did," she agreed. "I heard you moved downtown about a year ago, wanted a change." We talked for a few more minutes before parting ways. That chance encounter brought closure I hadn't realized I needed. Diane's guilt and my forgiveness were both part of processing what had happened. The story of the HOA break-ins became part of Maple Creek Estate's history, a tale told to new residents as a warning and a promise. This is what happened when we had bad leadership, and this is how we fixed it. I never heard what became of Patricia Morrison after her release from prison. She disappeared from public view, which was probably for the best. She'd become briefly infamous, her face associated with HOA tyranny and abuse of power. That wasn't a legacy anyone would want, but her actions had consequences beyond her own life. They'd changed how homeowner associations operated across Michigan and even nationally. Lawyers used the case as an example in drafting new HOA bylaws. Legislators proposed bills to increase oversight of HOAs and protect homeowner rights. The ripple effects extended far beyond one subdivision in Grand Rapids. As I sat in my downtown condo one winter evening, space heater running to supplement my heating system, I reflected on how a simple desire to stay warm during a brutal winter had led to such an incredible chain of events. I'd been thrust into a situation I never wanted, forced to fight battles I never anticipated, and ultimately became part of a story that resonated with thousands of people. The space heaters, those mundane appliances available at any hardware store, had become symbols of a larger struggle. The fight for individual rights against collective tyranny, the importance of reasonable governance, and the power of standing up to injustice. I never would have chosen to go through that experience. The violation of my home, the theft of my property, the stress of the legal process, none of it was pleasant. But I also couldn't deny that it had shaped me, taught me important lessons, and ultimately contributed to positive change. When people asked if I'd do anything differently, I always said no. I'd stood my ground. I'd refused to be intimidated. I'd helped my community heal and improve. Those were things I could be proud of. The polar vortex that had started everything became just another winter weather event in memory, one of many brutal cold snaps that Michigan endured. But for those of us in Maple Creek Estates who lived through those events, it would always be remembered as the winter when the HOA learned its limits, when justice was served, and when a community came together to rebuild itself better and stronger. And somewhere in my condo closet, 5 space heaters sat ready for the next cold snap. Legal and unchallenged symbols of a battle won and lessons learned.